When people look at modern Europe, they see a sprawling landscape of unparalleled wealth, advanced infrastructure, and a society that prides itself on being the cradle of Western civilization. But historians are forced to ask a troubling question. Is this sophisticated image just a thin veneer covering a deeply violent, chaotic past? For centuries, mainstream education has conditioned the world to believe that European history begins with the magnificent marble columns of Greece or the structured laws of the Roman Empire. But that is an incomplete truth. To understand how Europe actually became what it is today, the timeline must be forcefully pushed back. Way before the first kings, before the discovery of bronze, and even before our own species, Homo sapiens, ruled the continent. If we strip away the modern cities and the romanticized legends, what is left? A brutal, frozen wilderness where survival was an everyday battle against extinction. The actual foundation of Europe was not built on high philosophy. It was forged through radical climate change, extreme physical adaptation, and a ruthless million-year-long struggle for dominance between entirely different human species. This is the raw, unvarnished chronicle of Europe from absolute scratch, and the unsettling truth about the ancient evolutionary rivalries that set the stage for our world. The pioneers and the cannibalistic past. The narrative begins roughly 1.4 million years ago. At this point in deep time, Europe was a dangerous, unpredictable frontier. The continent was locked in a cycle of fluctuating ice ages, dominated by apex predators like saber-toothed cats and giant hyenas. For decades, a dominant consensus among archaeologists held that this vast, harsh wilderness remained completely devoid of human life until relatively recently. But science loves to dismantle old dogmas. In 1994, inside the limestone caverns of the Atapuerca Mountains in northern Spain, researchers unearthed an archaeological bombshell: fossilized remains of hominins dating back nearly a million years. This resilient, previously unknown branch of the human family tree was designated Homo antecessor, a Latin name translating directly to the pioneer or the explorer. These early Europeans were remarkably advanced for their time. They walked fully upright, possessed a facial structure eerily similar to modern humans, and manufactured basic stone tools to butcher meat. But their lives were brutally short, and the terrain offered no room for error. When researchers analyzed these ancient bones, they discovered something deeply disturbing. A prominent study published in the journal Nature revealed that many of the Homo antecessor remains bore distinct, unmistakable cut marks made by stone tools. These marks were identical to those found on the bones of wild animals that had been butchered for consumption. The data pointed to an inescapable conclusion. During periods of catastrophic famine and bitter cold, these initial European pioneers turned on one another, resorting to cannibalism as a desperate strategy to keep their small, nomadic clans alive. This raises a profound ethical and philosophical question. Should these creatures be viewed as primitive, cold-blooded monsters, or were they simply conscious beings pushed to the absolute limits of survival by an unforgiving ecosystem? Ultimately, even cannibalism could not save them. Trapped between advancing ice sheets and dwindling food supplies, Homo antecessor slowly flickered out, completely vanishing from the European landscape. They left behind an empty continent, but the evolutionary vacuum they created would soon be filled by a much more formidable successor: the conquerors of fire and steel. Around 600,000 years ago, a second major wave of migration pushed northward from Africa into Europe. This group belonged to a new species, Homo heidelbergensis. If Homo antecessor was the pioneer that merely tried to endure Europe, heidelbergensis was the conqueror that actively subdued it. They were physically larger, mentally sharper, and vastly more adaptable than any hominin that had come before. For the longest time, anthropology viewed these early humans as simple, opportunistic scavengers who merely followed behind larger predators to pick at leftovers. But a remarkable discovery in Schöningen, Germany, shattered this narrative entirely. Archaeologists excavating an ancient lakeshore uncovered a series of perfectly preserved wooden hunting spears. Over 300,000 years old, these weapons were aerodynamically carved from the dense wood of spruce trees, balanced perfectly to be thrown with lethal precision. These people were not scavenging. They were operating as highly coordinated, tactical apex predators. They routinely tracked and brought down massive Ice Age game, including wild horses, red deer, and even prehistoric straight-tusked elephants that were twice the size of modern African elephants. Furthermore, evidence gathered from multiple European sites confirms that Homo heidelbergensis achieved one of the most critical milestones in human history: the mastery of fire. They constructed deliberate hearths, utilizing fire to cook meat, ward off deadly nocturnal predators, and maintain body warmth during plummeting nighttime temperatures. But nature is indifferent to technological progress. As the hundreds of thousands of years rolled on, another massive, prolonged ice age gripped the northern hemisphere. Miles-thick sheets of solid ice marched down across Scandinavia, Britain, and Germany, creating an impenetrable geographic barrier. The populations of Homo heidelbergensis trapped within Europe found themselves completely isolated from the rest of the world. Cut off from Africa and Asia, genetic drift and the extreme pressure of the European environment forced evolution into overdrive. Over thousands of generations, their anatomy underwent a radical transformation, carving out a specialized, legendary human species designed explicitly for the cold. The Ice Age Master. The rehabilitation of the Neanderthal. By approximately 250,000 years ago, that evolutionary process was complete. The ultimate European survivor had arrived. Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthal. Here, we must address one of the greatest distortions in pop culture and historical reporting. For over a century, the word Neanderthal has been weaponized as an insult, used to describe a dim-witted, brutish, grunting caveman incapable of complex thought. But modern science has thoroughly exposed this as a biased, outdated myth. Anatomy tells us that Neanderthals were a marvel of evolutionary engineering. They were shorter and significantly stockier than modern humans, possessing massive, heavy bone structures and incredibly dense musculature. Their large barrel chests functioned as natural heat exchangers, warming up the frigid, dry Ice Age air before it could reach and damage their lungs. Most surprisingly, neurological studies of their skull shapes reveal that the average Neanderthal brain was actually larger than the average brain of a modern human living today. They did not just scrape by in the frozen tundra, they dominated it. They developed an advanced stone tool industry known as the Mousterian culture, using a sophisticated technique that required them to carefully prep a stone core before striking off a single razor-sharp blade. They were also the world's first chemical manufacturers. To attach their stone points securely to wooden spears, they harvested birch bark and subjected it to a highly controlled, oxygen-deprived heating process to create a durable, synthetic industrial glue. But their sophistication extended far beyond technology. It crossed into the realm of genuine humanity. An influential paper published by Cambridge University highlighted multiple Neanderthal skeletal remains that showed signs of severe, debilitating injuries, broken bones, blindness, and amputations. Amazingly, these individuals did not die when they were injured. Their bones had healed, and they had survived for years afterward. This is definitive proof that Neanderthal tribes were not ruthless, survival of the fittest packs. They possessed deep empathy, actively nursing their sick, feeding their disabled, and protecting their elderly. They buried their dead with profound care, with soil samples suggesting some graves were adorned with medicinal plants and wildflowers. Furthermore, recent uranium-thorium dating of cave art in Spain has revealed abstract geometric paintings that are at least 65,000 years old. Because modern humans had not yet reached Europe at that time, these stunning artistic expressions can only be attributed to Neanderthal minds. For nearly 200,000 years, they reigned as the undisputed, highly cultured masters of the European continent. Why, then,